Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to InnerViews, the podcast where we dive deep into the realms of therapy, healing, and intentional living. I'm your guide on this adventure, Ivory. Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey with me? Whether you're navigating the complexities of trauma, embracing intentional parenting, or seeking self-help strategies, this podcast is your sanctuary. InnerViews is not just a podcast, it's a community. A safe space where stories unfold and healing takes center stage. Your story matters. And here, courageous storytelling is the heartbeat of our existence. We'll be exploring powerful themes like healing, navigating the intricacies of foster care, the strength found in survival, the beauty of reclamation, and the pure bliss of joy. So if you're ready to join hands with a community that understands, subscribe now. Let's walk this path together because the journey toward understanding and well-being starts right here, right now. Welcome to InnerViews, where every step is a celebration of your resilience and a testament to the incredible strength within you. Let's make this journey unforgettable. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of InnerViews. I am super excited for today's guests who are both located in New York, and they'll be able to tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. I don't know who would like to go first, Tashaun or Sarah, but can you tell us about who you are and your titles?
My name is Tashaun Sudlow. I'm a credible messenger here at Riseborough. I work in a program, like an Artivism program called the Lyric Program here, where we look to amplify the voices of the youth. So it's youth-led, and we talk about social issues, things going on in the community, and then they make out of it, but not just art, like calls to action, those type of stuff.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Sarah, it's up to you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Robinson. My official title is the Coalition Coordinator of the Brooklyn Way. I do a little bit of everything. I like being out here, being in community, and yeah, that's me.
And if I'm not mistaken, I met you last year during the Faces of Foster Care Expo were we in Brooklyn? Forgive me if I got that wrong.
We were in Brownsville. Shout out to Ruth Horry.
Yeah, shout out to all of them. Yeah. And hopefully I get to meet Tashaun. Am I saying your name correctly, Tashaun?
Yes. Tashaun.
Okay. Hopefully I get to meet you too in the upcoming 2026 year. So can you talk a little bit about your experiences working with youth who have lived experience in the child welfare system?
For me, working with children in the child welfare system is both, I'll say, liberating and humbling at the same time. I'll say liberating because as a child who know what it's like to want adults to be there and show up for you and not being able to let that happen, to finally be in a place to be that change in the world is very liberating for me. I would say humbling because then you start learning about the things that other people go through, right? And seeing how resilient that these youth are, even in situations that you wouldn't even fathom. And so that's very humbling because you think a lot of times woe is me in life, but working with youth in this capacity has showed me that it's always worse somewhere, or you just never know. And meeting people where they are.
Yeah, I relate to that as a classroom teacher, even though I was in child welfare myself. I used to look at some of my students and know their stories and just be amazed that they even showed up because, wow, look at all they've been through and they're still here trying to learn English and be cheerleaders and things. And so, just crazy. Sarah, but what do you do in the child welfare system?
So my experience comes from, I worked for maybe 4 years in Scotland in part of the child welfare legal system framework in Scotland, which is a lot different, I think, in a lot of ways than it is here in the US. And also at the same time, it all comes from the same ugly core. So there's a lot of differences, yet a lot of similarities. I've just felt myself over the course of my life, I think. I feel quite connected to young people. I don't know why. I'm not a young person myself anymore. I'm an old 40-plus-year-old woman at this point. However, I do I don't know how to describe it. It's just a collective space that I revel being and I'm privileged to be a part of. And I've been doing that here in Brooklyn in Riseborough for the past 10 years. So yeah, I just really enjoy, and I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but I find great. I don't know. I don't know what the right word is, but I'm privileged and blessed to be connected to the young people that I am and that have allowed me to be part of their lives ongoing, which is the world's greatest privilege, to remain connected to people.
Thank you. I haven't been to Scotland yet. It's on my list. I saw it from Ireland. I'm super curious now. I'm going to have to pick your brain about some of the differences. Can you share really quickly, like, what do you think are some of the major differences between Scotland's child welfare system and what you've experienced? I'm assuming only New York. Is that
Yeah,
wrong?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. For me, only New York. So I guess to position my experiences, this is in 2003 to 2008, so like early 2000s. I worked within, I'm trying to think of like a comparison for here. It was young people who had been either charged with specific criminal offenses or charged and sentenced, and or had been deemed like out with parental control. So they had been through group homes, they'd been to foster care, they'd been to, I guess, the levels of the different types of welfare involvement, both legal and familial. And typically they would then be placed in the school that I worked in. It was like a school that they also lived in. So it was a mixture. They were locked in, but they weren't in prison, but it was an imprisonment of kind because, you know, their freedoms were limited. They were there because of a sentence or what have you. But the approach was more, they lived in little houses. And so we had family, it was more family based. We had the same staff. I worked with the same group of girls for years. And we worked with their social workers. We worked on reunification where possible. But yeah, yeah. So there was elements that were similar, but also elements that were very different. Yeah.
We're going to come back to that. And you all answer that, but if you want to highlight for the audience, so was there anything in particular that drew you into the work? I know that, Sarah, you mentioned you just felt drawn to youth, and Tashaun, you just felt humbled to be able to hear the different experiences that they overcome all the time. Was there any particular person or experience that really solidified for you? I want to work in child welfare. I want to do what it is that I'm doing right now.
For me personally, yeah, that happened with me early on, though. Right, I started working with children because, again, like my life, I just had to be responsible really early. And so early on, when I started working with children, I was trying to rule with the iron fist and do what I thought my Caribbean roots prepared me to do, and like what that dynamic, what I thought that dynamic looked like. And I'm working with a bunch of young Black boys. That's when I was being a paraprofessional for the Department of Education. And I'm working with these young Black boys, and they're being diagnosed left and right, being given all these IEPs, just having their work tarnished in front of them. And I was being a part of it. Authority, this kid is rude. You're supposed to be doing this. And I remember there's this one young man, and he was what they would call a problem child, but he's a genius. And I just remember one day I was reprimanding him for something. And so I had him in the room with me alone. And then I was like, we're not yelling or whatever. And I just sat there in silence, and I wouldn't be rude to him or nothing. And we were just sitting there. And he just said, "Mr. Sudlow, it was so much blood." And in that moment, he told me about like how he watched his father kill himself in front of him. And the boy, you see how you like talking about like showing up to school. And that boys come to school every single day before everyone. And it's like, there's so much rumors about all these things that happen in his life and all these IEPs and stuff. But hearing him vividly say what he saw and what he's going through, that changed my whole trajectory on the way we're supposed to deal with these people and these young people in the systems.
Please don't get me down the rabbit hole of overly these children, diagnosing these children with all these problematic things instead of addressing their trauma.
Yeah.
And then I just want to know, which part of the Caribbean are you from? Where are your roots?
My parents are Jamaican.
Oh, cool. Okay, what's a guan? Well, thank y'all for sharing. I love culture, y'all. So, if you don't want to talk about it, just tell me no. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about who you are and what brought you into this work, and you've already started this, Tashaun, but can you share a moment or a story that shifted how you understand the needs of the system impacted youth? And I really resonated when you talked about feeling like you were almost a part of the problem when you first came into working with kids and not realizing that necessarily our induction into the work of working with children and youth doesn't necessarily align with how we personally feel or have found to be true that's most beneficial to the kids that we work with, to the youth that we work with. So are there any other stories that you have? And you just shared a really beautiful one. I hope that kid was he able to get what he needed and have a better trajectory? Do you know?
By the time he left there, he did a lot of emotional work. I know he went to a specialized junior high school, but I never really knew what happened with him.
Okay.
He did end up leaving special ed and going to a specialized junior high school. I thought that was great of him because he's really smart. But yeah.
That's awesome. I'm crossing my fingers for him, hoping for the
Right.
best. I get to see my kids on Facebook now. And so it's interesting to watch them grow up. I didn't do that when I was teaching actively, but now that I'm not,
I get
I
that.
get to see their journeys and things. But Sarah, do you have any stories or any moments like that shifted your understanding?
So something that resonated with me with what Tashaun had said about being like complicit or part of the larger problem, quote unquote. I think about how I was maybe drawn to the work, sounds a bit creepy, but like how I came to be here, right? And it was, again, I'm coming from a place of not personal lived experience of welfare systems, but I think what I've only just recently realized is that it was seeing myself in someone else. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of differences and also a lot of similarities. And at the same time, at the beginning, I think I came with a perspective that was keeping me complicit and at the same time separated from what other people are experiencing rather than being in community and operating from a space of not intellectualizing and just seeing people for who they are, where they're at, and what they're dealing with. I think I've learned to, through the grace of my community, that they've taught me to go over myself, think past myself, and be more like see people for what they're bringing and understand that we are more than the worst thing we've ever said or done. We are more than the worst thing we've ever experienced. Like we are more than what society decides that we're going to be labeled as or penalized as, or I don't know if that makes much sense, but that sort of was what came up for me.
It makes so much sense, and it has me thinking from the developmental perspective of how much change happens ages 0 through 18, and the fact that a child can do something at 12 or 13 years old and get labeled as that for the rest of their lives is just so unfair and unkind. And so what I heard from you, Sarah, is giving people the opportunity for them to show you who they are right now. No matter what they've gone through, no matter what they've been labeled or experienced, no matter what they've been diagnosed, as Tashaun said, who are they right now? How do they want to be perceived right now? How do they want to treat me right now and show up in this space right now? And that is so important when working with young people in general because they're changing so much. Even just in my 20s, I'm glad the 20s are over. And I'm old now too, I guess. But like, every year in your 20s, you're like a different person. Like, my goodness, let alone being a teenager or a child. So that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you for sharing that. So you both run different kind of programs. I think there's overlap. You can clarify for our audience like how you all connect in your work. But what programs or practices are crucial in what you do, and what might national implementation look like if someone gave you kind of a limitless bucket of money and said, take this to all the states and all the cities? Like, what could that look like for you all?
Sean and I were talking about this earlier today. So for clarity, Lyric is like a direct service program under the Brooklyn Way, which is a community coalition where we do programming and policy and advocacy for systems level, community level change. What would we do with unlimited money? What I would love to do is make sure that everyone's like actual needs are met before blaming them for not doing something that we perceive they should be doing when you cannot get over what you both were saying about kids just coming to school because, yeah, you can't, people turn up. How are we going to like give them in trouble for not having a sharpened pencil? Give them all the pencils. Have all the pencils in the world. Like, I think that my experience of programs is that I don't know if this is necessarily like programmatic issues, but more like a larger structural issue is that we collectively refuse to address what the real issues are. If families have the access, the support, children may not need to enter into child welfare systems in the first place. Never mind. It feels like plugging the dam after the fact, like address the issues, the drains before it gets flooded. That's what I would love to do.
You're preaching to the choir right now. I think you're touching on like systemic and institutional inequity, really. And it's a tragedy because when you go to school to be a social worker, go to school to be a teacher, they teach you all these things that when you actually step into the space to do the work, you see most of the time it doesn't work that way. And it's like what your principal will tell you is write the kids up if they don't have a sharpened pencil, which your heart as a teacher knows is that like a pencil is the last thing this child needs to be worried about. Let me just have a cup of them that I'm going to buy on my own. Let me sharpen them before they get to class. And I'm going to give them what they need because they're here. And that is more than a beautiful miracle. And it's having to navigate that lack of preparedness from these institutions that are responsible for shaping us into what we need to be to do the work versus the lived reality, the lived experience of actually trying to do the work. So, Tashaun, I'm excited to hear what you would do with your artivism if you had just the opportunity to explode it all across America. What could that look like?
Well, for me, I think like with Artivism is youth led, and I think like initiatives like that are really, really, really important because, right? I seen something recently where it spoke of like children as a oppressed group, and I really agree with that sentiment. I think if we do things to help, like the program now, amplify children's voices and make them really a part of decisions that we're making for their future, then we will have healthier children. That's just how I say it. You know, like make them, instead of making all these decisions for them, just be like, as Sarah said, like stewards, just rather than leaders or that dynamic.
Oh, I know. Youth Voices Rising is all about that. We're trying to get them in the room. We're trying to have them be a part of the process from the top down, not like an afterthought, not just a tokenized representation of their group. I think that there's a saying like nothing about us without us. And I think that needs to really hold true. But historically, if we go back to the origins of America, we kind of always operated in that way. Unfortunately, we've excluded the people that we claim to serve and gave them what we thought they needed. And that has never worked out well for us. We need some changes to happen. I kind of skipped through our questions, but we're kind of here on this restorative justice and systems change lens anyway. So, speaking of agencies and institutions, what roles do you think agencies, nonprofits, and community stakeholders play in designing restorative initiatives? Like, what could we do now here in 2026 to kind of rectify some of these wrongs and kind of use the power that we do have in our everyday jobs to bring more restorative justice to the work?
Something you had said, Ivory, about my mind's gone blank. I can't remember, but you'd said something that made me think about this. And again, we were talking about this before. And I say this as an individual, not it's views and representations of my views only, not to be construed with any particular agency or nonprofit. However, when I think about, culture, that's what it was. You were talking about culture. Culture is like super important. And I think that restorative justice within schools has become co opted and weaponized in a way and not really implemented for the most part in the way that it was intended. I just recently took part in a transformative practices training. And truthfully, I went into it thinking restorative justice equals harm circles, right? That's kind of the gist of my understanding of what that meant. But then learning from people, hearing the historical context, like the modern historical context in terms of the prison abolition work that was done inside prisons that served as like the human justice framework or the human justice approach that serves as the root of modern, they don't like to call it restorative practices, but transformative justice principles and just the culture of it. For me, the role of agencies and nonprofits, it kind of seems like they shouldn't have a role, they should fund it, and that should be the role. With the nonprofit industrial complex, the replicating the corporate logics of capitalism within a space of human life, they all should fund it. Period. That they should provide the money, no questions asked. That should be some form of reparations, and it should be led exactly by community members in ways that make sense to them for it to serve the needs that they have, not from a space of this person or this group has done something wrong and therefore we need to repair harm. Because realistically, what harm are we talking about and what repair are we talking about? I'm sorry, I've gone off on a tangent there, but
listen, you're about to get me started too. We need to be really specific about the harms that we're addressing, right? Because we don't have the capacity to address all the harms. But if like your lane is this specific kind of harm, like I can do child welfare harm, I can do, chronic illness harm, then like stick to that, do that very well, because there's going to be someone else who can handle the other harms. And so like that, I think that's kind of one of the ways that we address all of the systemic inequity in America is like being really particular and nuanced in the work that it is that we do show up to do, because we can't do everything. And I know we want to. We're good-hearted people. We have great intentions, but like you also need to sleep and take care of yourself. Stick to what you know. Ron, I see you making a face. What are you thinking right now?
No. I completely agree with what Sarah was saying. And then also, like, you see how you say with the healing thing, like even that, like taking away those stigmas of, like you said, like doing it really well, like harm reduction. What does harm reduction really look like? Because sometimes in harm reduction, it can become like harping on something, right? Is that what you were saying, Sarah? Like restorative justice not being, oh, I need to heal from this, but more so, these are the things that have happened. We're on a journey and getting better with that and meeting people there rather than, I think in the co-op, then it gets caught up in like the past of what happened. And that becomes like people's identity. I think a lot of times that happens.
Don't get me started on identity, please. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can talk about through the child welfare lens. It is. And then also the fact that 13, 14, 15-year-olds are given this identity that they're no longer allowed to change or transition or grow from. It's just ridiculous, because thank goodness no one views me as I was when I was 14.
Okay.
Literally, because gross.
Imagine that.
I mean, we've just changed, right? We've all changed. And I honor who I was at 13 and 14 and 15, and I'm honoring who I am at 35. Just giving, again, youth the opportunity to grow and to be who they are in whatever capacities you can. So if that means, being with them as they make their art, if that means helping them grow through their trauma in whatever ways works, that's a really beautiful thing. Okay. Let's talk about accountability and implementation. And I'm sorry if these questions feel a little bit repetitive, but our audience needs to know. So how can restorative justice address systemic inequities, including racial disproportionality and punitive approaches? And I feel like y'all are kind of in a unique situation because New York is one of the most diverse cities in America. I mean, I love Brooklyn. Shout out to Brooklyn too. Y'all have a really diverse population of people in general. So we're not comparing it to maybe someplace in the South or someplace in the Midwest. So based on all of that, what are you seeing about the systemic inequities around racial disproportionality and punitivity?
Well, when we were talking about it earlier, we did agree that there's no one way to say that, right? To say that, to address it. Again, like Sarah was saying, like the co-opting and weaponizing of certain agendas for like corporate gains. I think, right, like you said, America, that's what America's built on. And so I don't know how exactly, me personally, I don't know how to say there is restorative justice in that realm.
So Tashaun, are you an abolitionist? Do you think we should just burn it all down and build something new? I'm hearing that you might be abolitionist in your
All I
thinking.
need is the
I'm
date
hearing
and time when we're gonna do it.
Okay, listen. We're at a really interesting precipice in the development of this country. And at this point, we've implemented changes, right? We've had periods where we've gone through, okay, we've had 20, 30 years to see how this rolled out. And we are still at this despairing place. So, listen, I'm all about radical changes. That's all I'll say. Do I fully identify as an abolitionist? Perhaps in some ways. I don't think that would capture all of my beliefs because, and I've encountered a lot of people who have shifted my mindset around this because if we completely abolish the child welfare system today as it is, a lot of children would actually be in really terrible situations. And there are a good amount of children who who cannot return back to their biological families or families of origin. And that would be harmful, dangerous, and or fatal. And so I'm not a fan of putting children out there to the wind. However, as an entire system,
I've seen this thing before. It's like I read a book, it was Sand Talking, it's talking about indigenous practices, and it's like when you give too much power to government instead of community, that's where you lose people. That's where you lose growth. And
yeah,
in the
I
spirit
like
of being abolishing.
I'm a fan of that. We're on the same page because when I think about solutions, I tend to think about rebuilding the community. And I feel like here in America in contemporary history, if we look back to maybe, I would say the 1940s or the 1960s through the lens of like African American culture was so strong and supportive in terms of the community that existed at the time. That's how the civil rights movement was able to come about. And from the civil rights movement, we had a lot of other things that became standard practice, things from like disability rights to things that trickle down to education, right? All the way down to everyday things like everyone can use the same water fountains. And so that was because of community. That wasn't because of the system. That wasn't because of the institutions. That was because of Black communities all across the country coming together to support one another. And when you think about that through a political lens too, because being political is dangerous sometimes. You can get blacklisted for the things that you believe and say and stand up for. But in those times, if you got blacklisted, your community had your back. They said, okay, we know you spoke up about that thing and they're not going to pay you. So we're going to make sure you have food on your table. We're going to make sure that you have housing. We're going to make sure that you're good so that you can get out there and keep fighting the good fight. Nowadays, we don't have that same community. So when people get blacklisted, they just fall into oblivion. And that's the scary thing because they might stand up and speak, but then we never hear from them again because they can't eat or pay their bills. And that's the missing component. So when I think about the abolitionist movement, I think about what you're saying, Tashaun, removing power from the government and putting it back into the hands of the people through community and through cultivating a healthier community. And I'm not saying that America has ever had it right when it came to community. And we have so many cultures that are a part of our culture that it makes it hard for us to even agree what is community, what does that look like. However, I think there are pieces and pockets in history that we can go back on, look on, and reflect on and pull from and get back to it. And I think it's a generational thing too. I talk about generations a lot. I know I probably got beef with some generations.
Oh, the intergenerational trauma is real. Like those things
Yeah.
all play a part. Like that's
Yeah. I feel like I don't know what Gen X thinks, but millennials and below, I really feel like there is a desire to rebuild community. I don't think a lot of people know how to do it. I don't think a lot of people have good examples of it. I don't think a lot of people come from strong communities in a way where they feel like they can recreate that themselves. But I think there's a need for and a longing for what community brings. Oh, I don't have support to raise my child. I really wish other people were here to help me. Or, oh, I would love to have a community garden, but I don't have time to tend to it all the time. I don't know about y'all, but like in my text groups, people are like, can we just go get a commune? Can we all just buy a plot of
mm,
land and build our houses there? And can we just all be together forever? And so there's just longing to return to communities, return to spaces where you are not only accepted and just celebrated, but where also you can help one another. And that is not convenient always, too. That's the other thing. People think being community is all about convenience. No, it's actually really inconvenient to be in community because you have to do stuff you don't want to do. You got to show up to Billy Bob's 8th birthday for the second time this year because his parents like to have his birthday 2 times for whatever reason. You got to go watch Grandma Linda's cat because she's the person who's done this for the community. It's not convenient. Forgive me 1 second. My insulin pump is making noise and it is not happy with me. Thank you, Christine, so much for editing this episode. I love you. She's going to take out all the bad stuff. So don't worry.
Bad is relative, right? Like, bad is relative. What is bad? It's just life. Exactly to your point, Ivory, like, community is not always easy. It's not always right on time. Things happen. And it makes me think about like the conception of yes and, right? Multiple things existing at the same time.
Yeah.
And you were talking about like looking back in history, and I learned recently, and I know it was new for me, not new information for a lot of people, I'm sure, but I learned about the history of the Lincoln Detox Center at the Lincoln Hospital in the Bronx came about. Young Lords and the Black Panthers took over Lincoln Hospital because the Bronx community wasn't being cared for. And the community demanded, these are the things that we need, and this is how we want to take care of each other. And the government wasn't doing it. And so they did it themselves, and it wasn't pretty and it wasn't fun. And it ended up, the government did subsidize this for a short period, and then the government does what the government does. And also at the same time, like to your point, Ivory, there are examples of this existing. We're not in a new, like none of this is new necessarily. And also we can look to the past to see how we can reconcile and not fix it, but move to a better future. Imagine something different, because something different is possible. Exactly to the points that you've been making. I mean,
I think too, just even if you want to look at what we have now available, even within this country to look at, you reminded me, Sarah, if we look at immigrant communities, they're a really beautiful example of what it could look like or could be a foundational starting point for us to model, like, what does the new American community look like? Because listen, for people to come from other countries and be able to support themselves, to buy their cars and their homes in cash because they keep their economy in their community, give each other loans within the community, there is something to learn about that. And there is a top-down approach to that because there's just so much power in community. Could you imagine if you could go to your friend and say, hey, I need $80,000. I don't want to go to a bank to do this. And they were like, all right, sure. That's how the community works. Could you imagine?
Something that what you guys are making me remember, something that, because when we were talking about it earlier, Sarah did say that in building community relationships are really important. Yeah. And like, you could see it with social media and the way that devices separate people, why I'm just drawing connections and why things may be lacking while we're having a conversation.
Yeah. Feel free to go ahead. I mean, that's one of the things I do love about the internet is the community that's readily available, and it can go really left. So you have to have a lot of discernment and a lot of media literacy, right? But I think that there is also a really beautiful opportunity. And I personally have a lot of meaningful communities I'm engaged with on specifically LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. There are literal groups on there that I'm like, my life is better because of them. And if I need something, I can reach out to them. I can literally reach out to them and say, I need a pump supply. Can someone send that to me in the next 24 hours? It will be at my door. And I'm just like, this is amazing and this is beautiful. And like I said, I really feel positive about younger generations being able to identify the need for community and be at least willing to start building that and translating that from online into real life. Because those are two different things too sometimes. But I just I don't know. I need some representatives from the older generations to come forth and share what's the problem. Why is there not a willingness? Why is there not a curiosity? I don't know what's going on. And I talk about, this makes me think about succession too. Forgive me if this feels off task, y'all, but I also always wonder, where are the elders to talk to us about the communities that they were engaged in or that they grew up in? And I know a lot of the leaders from the civil rights movements who would have been in their prime are largely very elderly and or have passed away at this point, because a lot of the people who were babies in the 60s were not prominent leaders in the 60s. So it's like they might have been born there, but they didn't know what was going on. And so a lot of the people who were actually active and who were doing the work and who were the community leaders and pillars, they have gone on to glory, or to wherever it is that they've gone. And so there hasn't been a translation of, okay, there hasn't been a preparation for younger generations to be put in place to lead and sustain communities too. And that's a problem that we need to address as well. So once we establish these communities, we need to pass that information on, and we need to succeed that power before it gets too late. And we need to prepare those in our community to be the sustainers and the pillars of the community. So I digress. Let's move on to our next question. So, what does it truly look like to center youth and lived experts in decision-making spaces? And what does that look like in the work that you all do every day?
Ivory, I don't think that you're digressing at all, because when you were talking there, it made me think about Toni Morrison quote, and apologies if I'm not saying it correctly, but about she talks about when you free yourself, it's sort of almost your duty to free someone else. She doesn't ask you to free everyone. She doesn't ask you to someone else. That stewardship, the collective responsibility. So you free someone else, and when you're in power, you empower someone else. So it's again that stewardship, the collective responsibility. And then that makes me think about when we look back at history, the moments where that has happened, like that stewardship, the stewardship of ancestral wisdom and development of critical consciousness amongst communities. And I do think that it's happening now, and also in the spirit of multiple things being true at once. And also, I think that we do need to focus on stuff like that, more of like collective critical consciousness raising and awareness and development, and saying the hard things out loud, accepting this for what it is, naming it and moving past it to continue to build. Because again, like you said, community doesn't always feel comfortable. It doesn't always feel easy, but discomfort doesn't necessarily mean harm.
That is key, because people will get upset and uncomfortable and completely leave and abandon the mission. It's like, wait a minute. Like, you thought that you were going to be able to go through this process unscathed? No, we also need to address the things that make you uncomfortable. We also need to address the things that make you biased in this work. And we love you and we're going to support you, but you're wrong. And let me give you the data that proves that. And here's something different. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to go through that process, unfortunately. And that's what we're seeing. There's way too many niceties, in my opinion, right now that are happening in these critical conversations. I'm sorry, Bill. I don't care what you have to say about this. You are wrong. All right. And I know that other people can't say that because you pay their bills and you write their checks, but I'm going to say it. Okay. And it's okay that you're wrong. Your intentions aren't to be the malicious person, but it's coming across that way. And here's what we can do differently. And I think we need to be more brave about that. And again, it goes back to, are you in a space to really be able to do that? I'm not going to say to do that if you're going to end up sitting on a street corner, because no one's going to hear your mission at that point. But we need to be strategic in how we bring up these conversations, and we need to be willing to be uncomfortable. All of us willing to. I don't know about y'all, but I feel like working with young people, there's always a piece of me that's like, well, I'm going to be wrong at some point, and they're going to call me out at some point.
To your face as well.
To
They won't, and they won't be nice about it. They will tell you all about yourself to your face, which is the best thing ever.
Yeah, and I love that about working with younger people. And they're also like bloodhounds when it comes to like people not showing up as their authentic selves. And they're also like going to call you out if something's not okay. If you're not okay, they're going to, Miss Bennett, what's the problem? No, Ms. Bennett, I know that you're trying to teach us about prepositional phrases right now, but we know that every day you have your little cup on the desk and you sip your tea in the middle of this activity. Why are you not doing that? We're going to talk about that. They will hold you accountable to what they know to be true about you. And if you're not willing to do that work, you probably shouldn't be working with young people at all, because you're going to change. That's the thing. People are resistant to change. You're going to be changed in one way or another. And I think it could be good and it can be bad. Some people change in really bad ways, right? Some people harden themselves. Some people go down that kind of path that Tashaun and I talked about when they get into this field. And you realize that there's a tension between what you were taught and what the reality is. Some people adapt to that for the sake of the kids and the work and the passion and the love and the calling. And some people don't. And they just go completely left and continue down that hardened path that they were started in. And it usually never ends well. And I hate that those people usually tend to get the most power systemically and institutionally. Like, they're the ones who end up being principals and CEOs and executive directors. And it's like, how? It's how, because the foundation of America is inherently, systemically, and institutionally biased towards oppressed people. And when you follow along that path, you follow along the path of America, and it rewards you a lot of the time until it doesn't. Let's see what the next few months unfold politically in this country, right? Because I feel like a lot. You know what? I digress. We're
No,
not gonna
no,
get
no.
into.
That- oh,
I love
What?
these digressions. I love these digressions. Keep digressing because absolutely.
I mean, what a time to be alive, right? I don't know about y'all, but 2026 has felt like 4 years already, and we are barely. We haven't even made it to February, Valentine's Day. Like, I don't.
The weekends feel like decades because everything like the news cycle, the like uh, selective outrage that comes along with these punctuating events that are just like explosive to mask these other things that are underlying and happening that have been happening for decades, centuries, generate like it's too much. Too
But the
much,
weekends
y'all.
feel like fever dream decades. Like you're not conscious. Like you're barely hanging on to life. And then, like then another
And then
week
we all
comes.
have to go to work on Monday. Like don't
Yeah.
you think like we're like embodying cognitive dissonance of like accepting this reality and then just going through the motions of okay, hi guys, I'm here at work. Like nothing's happening.
Oh,
like severance.
yeah. I think about that in the context of like rest too. Like even me right now, like recovering from the flu, in an ideal world, I would have just taken 2 weeks off of work because I've been sick for like that amount of time. But no, because we're in America and we're in a capitalist society. I'm not saying my bosses wouldn't let me take off because they probably would have. Shout out to y'all. But I have things that I have to do, right? And other organizations that I have to be accountable to. And it just really sucks that even like we can't take the time that we need on a Saturday and a Sunday to take care of ourselves, to be present with our families, to be present with our communities, to do the things together that bring us joy. Enough of that isn't happening. Like, how often do you really get to be around people and just have fun? I mean, I don't even remember the last time I had fun, to be honest. Like, fun is just not happening right now. Work is happening, parenting is happening, winter is happening. And so it's just like, how often do you get to just giggle with your friends and have foolishness or do something that brings y'all joy as a group? And that's a really important part of community too. If we can't even find the time to just exist and to have fun, we're not going to be able to come together for the harder things either. Those are the things that strengthen bonds. Those are the things I go back to education because I don't know if y'all know, I was a teacher for several years, but the first few weeks of school, you spend a lot of time building relationships and connections with your students. And not only between you as your teacher and with your students, but between your students amongst themselves. And so instead of prioritizing the curriculum per se, you prioritize bonding, you prioritize fun, you prioritize games. And that sets you up for a stronger start to be able to delve deeper into your content area, whatever that might be. But when do we get to do that in real life?
It's funny,
No.
we were talking about that just earlier. Tashaun
Yeah.
was like and I think also that naming of joy and space to just exist as you are without any expectation of productivity or we're not being joyful for the reason of XYZ. It's just joyfulness for the sake of joyfulness or joyfulness to be with yourself even. I also think about how that joyfulness again gets co-opted often
Mm-hmm.
because I read something that was talking about joy, to truly be joyful, to truly be exhibiting joy, you do have to name the things that are happening that are not joyful. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that it's allowing that thing to take over your moments of joy and celebration, but like ignoring it is just escapism, right? It's individualizing, it's not being part of the collective. And it again also makes me think about when we talk about working with young folks specifically, people in positions of power, and I'm sure I've done it myself as an adult. We don't want to be told about ourselves. Like we automatically assume, well, they're wrong. How dare they? They're coming out their face at me. They're being disrespectful. Well, no, maybe you are just like, maybe you do need to take a beat and think about something. Or that was a tangent. You digress. I go on tangents, Ivory. So
No, it was
that was a
good.
tangent, bro.
It was beautiful. It just highlights that need to like always be in a place of being a lifelong learner, right? That's really what we're
Mm-hmm.
getting to and alluding to in whatever context. It could be
Mm-hmm.
professional, it could be personal, it could be communal, but just being willing to be in a place of learning and don't look at that as like you're wrong, I'm right kind of a thing. Look at it as like it's a new day, it's a new time. maybe it calls for something different. Maybe this is something we're all discovering together here and now, but just being willing to grow with time as time moves on and to not be static. I've experienced personally a lot of leaders, in my opinion, who are not good leaders anymore because they're so static. Like maybe you were a great leader in 1979, but it is 2026. You need to change the way you're doing things. You're not working just with one generation anymore. You have several generations underneath you. You need to be aware of that culturally and approach that appropriately, or you're going to lose your work staff. You're going to lose morale. You're going to lose a lot of things if you can't stay up with the times and just be open and willing to change and to grow. And so that's why I love the concept of being a globally minded citizen too. And I love the chance anytime I get to hear perspectives of how child welfare is operating in other countries. So if you ever want to bring any information about Scotland to us, because we all need to have some kind of world symposium where we're talking about what's going on in child welfare everywhere, right? Because maybe something that's going on down in Australia or in New Zealand or Madagascar, maybe something that they're doing can help us over here in America because we don't know everything. And no one else knows everything. But if we come together and share what we know, we can piece it together and figure it out. That's the beautiful part of America, right? We do have the ability to mix and to mold cultures. Okay, y'all got me talking. See, I'm losing my voice. All right. So, our last question about accountability and implementation. How do we ensure lived expertise is meaningfully valued and compensated? I'm not even going to get started down the rabbit hole on my opinions on this, but how do you ensure lived expertise is meaningfully valued and compensated?
That's such a valid question because it's not currently, it just isn't. You'd mentioned earlier about sort of tokenization, positioning of particularly young people with a lived experience for the optics of inclusion. And in reality, that's not. And I mean, I speak from somebody who I'm sure I've done that as well. Again, not with the intent to be harmful, but complicity is complicity. And yeah, I don't know that there is, I don't know that I have an answer for that, truthfully. I have a responsibility to my community to make sure that I don't care if somebody yells at me, they can like get mad at me or whatever, but if it means that a young person is paid for their expertise, good, that's fine. They should be. I can take somebody not liking me. I'm good. You know what I mean? Like there's ways to your point about being strategic, but then that also makes me think about how we're being strategic. Should we just flip the table and build our own table, or are we being strategic to get a seat at a table that collectively people shouldn't really be at in the first place? Does that make sense?
You're asking the right question, Sarah. Listen, sometimes I'm ready to just flip the table. But then we're not going to have any tables and we got to build them all up. I think,
but yes, and right? Yes, and
not a bad thing. I think this is going to sound so terrible, but I talk to my friends all the time about like, we really just need to get the systemic and institutional power from these older generations because they are the ones holding us back from being able to make these big moves. And it's not to say that we are a monolith as the millennials or as Gen Xers. We're not a monolithic group of people. We all have different views and different perspectives. However, I truly believe that we don't have enough institutional or systemic power yet to make any of the changes that we would like to see happen. And we don't even know what that looks like because we haven't been able to move the needle far enough because we don't have the power. We don't have the votes. We don't have the money. We don't have the resources to be able to do that. Feel free to disagree with me. If y'all know some Gen Xers or millennials who are like, out here holding power, shout them out. Like,
I wouldn't even say holding power, but like it seems like they're more shying away from even the ideas of power. Like even the way that they show up in school or at work is very different from how we would shut up. Because you talked about like, from what I gathered with this younger generation, they're gonna take the 2 weeks off. They are very much like, it seems careless sometimes in certain ways, but in my opinion, what I've seen is that they're well aware of the state of the world. But like when you tell someone they're not a part of something enough times, these ones are more like, okay, I'll go with my tablet.
And that's where we got to rein them in, right? And it's not even necessarily trying to like make them who we are. We don't want them to be little versions of us.
Right.
But what we do have to give them is basic foundational skills so that they can become and actualize their own leadership. And that will hopefully look different than our versions of leadership. And I'm making assumptions that like we're even in similar generations. I don't know how old y'all are, but okay. But I mean, we have to be able to prepare them to whatever your belief system is, here is how you're a good leader. You have to understand who you're leading. Who is your team? What is your mission? What are your core values and beliefs? How do you treat people well? What does reciprocity look like in this kind of situation? Do you understand power dynamics and power imbalances? Do you understand the basic definitions of inequity or restorative justice? We have to give them the tools so that they can actualize it. And I think that's the missing component because I don't know when the last time y'all stepped into a public school, there's a lot of not learning going on. I mean, and I was a teacher in Texas, just to give y'all reference. So the history wasn't even accurately being taught. And so, first and foremost, we can't leave our children to be solely educated just by public schools. If you can afford private education, that's fantastic, but also be mindful of what they're consuming still. Look at those curriculums, inquire, talk to their teachers. But we have to teach our kids the history, the true history of this country, and give them the skills and the tools they need to make manifest whatever it is that they're meant to make manifest. And so I think that's one of the ways that we address it. And they are kind of all over the place, Tashaun. It's a little scary. But
I used to think it's scary. I think it's a move from even us. You see, right now we're being the adults saying like,
oh, we are the adults. Isn't that always so shocking?
Right? We're being the adults saying what we think the young whippersnapper should do. And it's like, actually, they have a whole different idea of how they want their world to be. And that's what I talk about with like, even having them, because I catch myself doing that now, right? Like I'm 32 now.
Okay, so we're kindred spirits.
Yes. But I catch myself a lot of times like, it should be like this or whatever. And it's like, oh, actually, you're in your future part of it. Like this is about the next generation.
Yeah.
Like this is not about how you thought it was going to be flying cars and stuff right now. This is not about your whimsical idea of what the future should be. Of course, being a part of it, I'm still a part of the world, but like there's a lot coming now.
I agree with you.
That makes me think about there's multiple projects, I'm sure, but there was a research project done at John Jay, and they worked with youth and young adults who were like street network involved as co-researchers, not solely as like they weren't just studying, the street network. They had young people as co-researchers. To your point about leadership and what Tashaun was saying about shifting our perspective and what we think we should be expecting, quote unquote, that and a lot of other things similar to that study came out and shown that there are a lot of young people that do exhibit wonderful leadership, just because it doesn't necessarily fall within the lines of acceptability. And again, it's not assigning right or wrongness, it's more about perception. Like the acceptability of someone who is operating a street network, because it's like this underground network, it automatically is unacceptable, quote unquote. But when you look at it within their network, they have reciprocity. They have, and I'm not saying that to say that street networks are great, but the point being, like, yes, and right, multiple things can exist. Why is this great leadership in this structure having been pushed underground? Why are they having to do things that may cause them harm or other people harm? What are we collectively doing that we're not meeting their needs in a way that's amplifying their obvious abilities to be leaders, to be a collective person, to be someone in the community? And what would it look like if we did sort of honor those skills for what they are, rather than say they're bad because of the context within which they're being developed? If that makes sense.
That makes so much sense, Sarah. You made me think about one of the pitfalls that I see with navigating lived experience inclusion, because I think that it's often done not well and it falls into tokenization and exploitation, because you are working with marginalized individuals who have not been traditionally prepared to be leaders in necessarily professional capacities, right? But you're bringing them into these spaces that have clear expectations around what professionalism look like, what it means to show up in a specific kind of a way. And whenever people, I've seen this happen time and time again all across the country, is like anyone who has lived experience is just brought to the table to fulfill the lived experience checkbox. But we know that they have not been prepped as to who is in the room. We know that they're not aware of the power dynamics in the room. We know that they are just there to fulfill that aspect of like, oh no, we have lived inclusion people here. Look, so and such and such. But you haven't taken the time out to, like you said, get them acclimated into the professional dynamics and the cultural dynamics of the spaces in which we're bringing them into. And I try to always highlight that in my work. It's like, yes, I've been chosen for a lot of things for lived expertise, professionalism, but there are so many other people who have really valuable experiences and lived experiences who are not here because they don't know how to speak in a certain kind of a way, because they haven't been prepped on how to dress in a specific kind of way, because they don't understand the power dynamics that they're coming into play with who they're meeting with right now. And that doesn't sit well with the people who are in the room, or because they don't really understand there's a time and a place, there's a way to say things to get your point across. And it never sits well with me because it's like, don't invite people into a space that you haven't also prepared them for. And I'm not saying to erase who they are, like you said, but there's one thing to be, how would you say, fluent in street leadership. And there's another thing to be able to be adaptable and malleable in any kind of a situation, which lends to success. And we can get into the conversation of like, what is it called? Code switching. I know. I know that's a really, really big thing, but my thing is, listen, again, let's give the kids the tools that they need. And once they become well aware of their own power and leadership, they can choose whether or not they want to use them, but at least they have the option of using them. And the same goes for, I wouldn't take a group of kids from America who only speak English and drop them in the middle of Paris and say good luck. I would at least give them basic French skills so that they can try to navigate to the best of their ability. Those who want to learn French can learn French. Those who don't want to, they can leave it at the door, but at least they've been prepared and given the opportunity to be able to navigate a space safely and to the best of their ability. And so when we think about including people who have lived experience, we have to prepare them. We have to give them the option as to not, they want to code switch or not. I'm not telling people to code switch, but at least they have the option of doing that. And I'll stop there because I could talk to you for 4 hours about this. Let's talk about calls to action. So, what is one concrete change listeners can advocate for locally today?
Something recently passed, and I forget the exact number, but it was essentially mini cops in schools. And whilst I love, adore the school safety in my son's school, I trust her implicitly with his life. There are individuals, in the system of policing in schools is just generally harmful, given, and I think even more so given our current immigration climate, because we need. It was just me and Tashaun were talking about this, and we had an interesting conversation about whether police should be in schools given immigration. I always think concrete changes that we can collectively advocate for locally within our small sphere of influence is like consciousness raising, shifting, development, and community building, whatever that looks like. I don't think we necessarily always have to reach for like these large policy changes. Not to say not to do that, but at the same time, like multiple things exist in, right? I can control what I can control within my sphere of influence. And if my sphere of influence is we're collectively raising our consciousness about the impact of policing in schools and immigration, then that's what we're going to do for this period of time. So yeah, collective consciousness raising.
Small order,
Maybe.
no big deal.
Yeah. Read a book, y'all. Read a book. Multiple books.
And in the work that you all do, how can professionals better show up with consistency, humility, and care?
By first checking themselves, reflecting on your intentions, your biases, your actions, why you do the things that you do. I had a supervisor, Rebecca, she used to say that she's like, when we was working with children, I used to work in an autism clinic, and she would be like, to a room of grown adults, she'd be like, do the kindest things in the kindest ways. And people thought she was so cringe, but like, I used to feel that when she said it, like, like, it's easy to fall into life is stressful and those type of stuff, but do the kindest things in the kindest way. I think, especially in the dynamics that happen, a lot of adults they forget that, and they forget that though they're going through their stuff at this moment, whatever hours that they have the youth with them is like as unfair, like you're in charge in a way, like, you know, of their well-being, their happiness, those type of stuff. A lot of that falls on you. And with that power comes the responsibility to do your best.
Yeah.
So I feel like that.
It reminds me of that quote, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, did you want to share?
I think that, and I can only, I guess, speak from my own experiences of like perpetual curiosity. Like, I think that is our, you don't know what you don't know, and it's okay. Sometimes I think, I'm sure I've done it before, and my experiences with adults and working with young folk is oftentimes they come in with this, I know this, and you will respect me because I know X, Y, and Z. And everyone on this call knows that's not how young people, like, it's not how like life works. It's just not. I don't know why we assume and expect young people to just automatically fall in line with that, because I know that I wouldn't. If someone comes into my face saying, I know this and you're going to respect me, because I would tell them no in not so many nice words. And again, something you had said earlier, Ivory, but kids can see right through you if you're not being. One thing that I have always been super grateful for within the spaces that I have worked and been is the ability to show up as my full self. And if you can't pretend with kids, and not because, you know, you just can't, because they will tell you all about yourself. They can see through everything. And also at the same time, it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm really sorry that I did that. That my bad. And I promise, like, I'll try not to do it again. Like, apologizing, being curious, asking what happened rather than why did you do that. And I know that sounds like really simple, but I think that it lends to like actual relationship building, because, and actually, honestly, adults need to care. Like, you need to want to show up. You need to want to be there for more than a paycheck. And if you're not, then there are other ways to make money. Yeah, you need to want to care and be curious.
First of all, what paychecks?
Well, literally,
if y'all are doing this work for the paycheck, you're in the wrong field.
But 100%. But at the same time, you know what I mean. Some people.
No, I'm just being facetious, because we don't get paid enough for any of these roles that we've held. But an undercurrent of what you're saying, and I just want to reiterate for the audience, is like the importance of cultivating emotional intelligence. And you're also talking about kind of relational intelligence and communication skills. And so we have to be willing to model, and this is coming up so much as like a parent of a 2-year-old who was in his terrible toddler era, y'all. he is a menace. Not intentionally, just a part of development. But cultivating that emotional intelligence for them, giving them the skills to communicate with one another, what it is they're feeling, what it is they want, what it is that they need, but also giving that relational skill dynamic. And it's particularly important for those with lived child welfare experience, because they don't get the opportunity to socialize in the same way that most other children do, most other young adults do. And so it's critical for us to be able to implant that emotional intelligence curriculum, whether it be traditionally in a school system or just in a community-based organization, but giving them that solid foundation for communication, understanding one's feelings, how do you repair after arguing, forgive me, and how to maintain healthy relationships, how to identify healthy relationships versus unhealthy relationships. And so that's been an undercurrent of what we've been talking about a lot today. And just being willing to show them, like, I make mistakes too. I'm going to apologize. And I hope that one day when you make a mistake, you'll be willing to apologize as well. Modeling is like super duper important. Okay. I have 2 rapid questions, and then our time together today is going to be done, but hopefully I'll see y'all soon when I'm in New York. I haven't forgotten to send you that email. And I'm going to switch the order that I usually do this. What advice would you offer youth who are currently navigating the child welfare system?
Okay. When I thought of this, I thought 2 parts, right? First, for the youth, use your frustrations as fuel rather than making it make you weary. But then also, like, for the adults, because, right, in these systems, it is the adults who perpetuate the experience. It's like, do better. You know, manage your expectation of the youth. Lead with grace. Remember to meet them where they are, not where you think they should be.
So, in me thinking about this question, like I kind of also, I'm looking at it in twofold, similar to what Tashaun was saying. I don't necessarily know that I want to give people, like young people, advice per se, more a commitment to them. Can't advise on something that I know nothing of in terms of embodied realities. What I can do is say that I will remain committed to holding the adults accountable, to holding the fire under the feet of the adults that don't see you for who you truly are. We'll keep naming it when it doesn't always feel great, and we'll remain committed to supporting you in whatever way you need. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I don't usually do this, but I'm like inspired by y'all's responses to share some advice. And I did spend 17 years in foster care, but y'all really made me think of it's so important to acknowledge your privileges because even amidst all the adversities, there's always a privilege. Like, can you walk on your own? That is a beautiful privilege. Can you speak? That is a beautiful privilege. Can you breathe on your own? So just like acknowledging all of the things that are going right. And I'm not saying there's not a lot of bad. There's a lot of bad, but there's also always some good. And so just trying to find that silver lining and that good is super duper important. Okay. Last but not least, before our time together ends, what changes do you hope to see in the child welfare system in your lifetime? Rapid fire, Tashaun, go.
In my lifetime, like I said, more community oriented, right? It takes a village, and the government has too much power, and we need to refocus these things back on community. That'll be my biggest things. Not necessarily just abolishing, but making sure that even people, foster parents, everybody, like whoever has these children are supported so that they can better support the youth.
I think mine is quite similar, like a significant investment in community reciprocity, familial, whatever that looks like for people, care. Yeah, investment at that level in things that have worked culturally, have worked communally, but have been historically underinvested and taken advantage of. So, yeah, investing in people, period.
I agree with that. You said something, Tashaun, that made me think about America. So there's this like castle and a fort around a moat, like in the middle, right? But then we have all of our tiny little villages around it. And so this is like the majority of America, and in the middle is a terrible government. And so we have to band together and get the dragons and slash the castle, right?
Literally. And there's no way to do it unless we come together.
We have to come together. All of our tiny little villages, we got to come together. We got to get our little machines together. We got to build our Trojan horse. And that castle down.
Differences in all, no?
Yes. And on that note, okay, can you shout out your organizations one more time if our listeners want to support you all or visit you all? And then we'll also put your information in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate your time today and everything that you've done before now, right now, and everything that you're going to do in the future to help and create some restorative justice for those with lived experience. So shout out your organizations one more time for our audience, please.
Well, shout out Riseboro, the Brooklyn Way. You already know.
Thank y'all so much for being here.
The InnerViews podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Youth Voices Rising via Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or Safe Camp Audio on all major social media. This podcast was produced and mixed by Christine Onjoko. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you consider sharing, subscribing, and or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast.